afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a good day. NFL League Year gets underway pretty quickly here. That is roster building time. Let's welcome in Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. So, Fred, this is the time when all of the NFL teams are plotting out free agency, the franchise tag, all that stuff. The draft's ahead of you. When you look at this Browns roster moving forward, what do you see as the biggest areas of need?
Yeah, I mean, I think they did a lot of heavy lifting in the last 2 years in the offseason, and I really don't think the roster needs a whole lot of upgrades. I think there's some specific areas that they can look to and they will address. But on defense, I would say on the defensive line, you have a little bit of a, as you saw last year, the importance of the defensive line. Right now on paper, defensive tackles, you only have 2 under contract. Obviously, Delvin Tomlinson, who was your big signing last year, and the rookie Siaka Ika, who very didn't play a whole lot. He was a third-round pick, but he sat behind Maurice Hurst and Shelby Harris and Jordan Elliott. Unfortunately, those 3 are all free agents. They were all, well, Elliott was in the last year of his contract. The other 2 were 1-year signings, Harris and Hurst. So they need to make some adjustments there. I have a total on the defense. I think they have 7 of 11 starters returning. And I think most of those guys that are not returning or not currently on the roster because they're free agents, they could return them. They could re-sign them if they wish. The biggest question would be Zadarius Smith, who could leave in free agency, but I think they would try to get him back. So defensive line, I could see that being addressed in free agency or in a trade. And I could even see a big splash, in free agency at defensive tackle or end. On offense, I think the biggest need, in my opinion, is wide receiver. I think they need a top-end wide receiver that can go with Amari Cooper and would be maybe move Elijah Moore more into the third role as opposed to the second role. Somebody that can really balance out Amari Cooper, or maybe even somebody that might be ahead of Amari Cooper. I mean, right now you're very thin, behind Cooper.
Yeah, that would be my areas as well. And I think they probably would like Hurst and probably Harris back. I think both of them played pretty well on 1-year deals. And I think, those are guys they like.
Yeah, I think they have an inside track on both of them. Harris didn't get signed till it might even been after Greenbrier last year. I don't remember him being down in West Virginia, but it was pretty close that time after a couple of weeks of training camp. And you get a guy in their 30s, sometimes they sit around, see what their options are. And I don't see it being a lot different. I think he's 31, 32. Those type guys, I think you can find, but it'd be nice to know you already have them. I think a lot depends on what they do. Do they go all in to try to get a Christian Wilkins, Chris Jones type of player? And then maybe that lessens the need for Shelby Harris or Maurice Hurst. But I do think you need depth there. And I think both of those would be very nice additions, especially Harris. He really played well. Hurst, the knock on him has been being able to stay healthy. I know he tore his pec muscle late in the year, had surgery. I don't know if he's ready to go at the beginning of the season or where he stands, on that. But both those guys would be in the top of my list. But if they can go get, even a bigger name in free agency, that I wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen. I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah, Jim Schwartz's defense works best when you have a defensive tackle that could pressure up the middle. Most defenses do. This is from PFF, and it's interesting. NFL Combine winners and losers by numbers on offense. So winners, teams that need a wide receiver using Kent Lee Platt's relative athletic score, which the Browns use, that's the RAS, measures how athletic a prospect is against past prospects at that position. There are 12 wide receivers who tested in the 95th percentile or better. That would be called a loaded position. Loser, Bucky Irvine, running back from Oregon. To start, very small for the position, 5'9", 192. Didn't particularly test very explosively either. 29.5 vertical was 5th percentile, 97 broad was in the 33rd percentile. Let's talk about the wide receivers. I mean, there are some really good wide receivers, and when you see that many with that high of a relative athletic score, there's going to be some guys available when they draft in the second round that are pretty attractive to them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you're looking for a wide receiver, this is a good year to get one. Unfortunately, a lot of them really ran well, and one set a combine record with speed, and you know, that is going to lift them all up, you know, in the draft eyes of other teams. It's a passing league, so wide receivers seem to be more and more, you know, on the, you know, looking at. I think in the Browns situation, you know, last year they added 3 wide receivers. They traded for Elijah Moore. They signed Marquise Goodwin as a unrestricted free agent, and then their top pick in the draft in the 3rd round, they took Cedric Tillman. So I still wouldn't be surprised to see them add a veteran wide receiver through a trade or in free agency, and even draft one in the 2nd round if they felt he was worthy. My trepidation there is it just seems like some positions, some players aren't ready to go from day one. You need to add them, but they haven't had a lot of luck, you know, but they're drafting, the guys they've drafted have been the 3rd round or earlier. So the 2nd round,
Yep.
unless you have a chance to get a Marvin Harrison, I don't know who you have that you know can step in day one and be a difference maker. And this team is trying to win now. They need a difference maker now. So I can see them drafting one if they really like one that's there. But I see them adding somebody or looking at free agency, or more so, in my opinion. I think they'll go the trade route if they can to get that wide receiver.
All right, so this time of the year we always talk like this. 2nd round pick. Is Andrew Berry more likely to trade up, trade back, or stay put? And with him, he's done all of them.
Yeah, I think it all matters in free agency and trade. I mean, if you really feel like you need a wide receiver now, and if they don't feel like they were able to get somebody in the trade market or in free agency that can make a big difference, then I can see them trading up to get one of those must-need positions like wide receiver. The only other position I could see that would be on the defensive line. Again, it just historically seems to me that it takes time for guys, unless they're just a blue chip top 10 talent, to step in immediately at wide receiver or defensive end, defensive tackle, and make a difference. So I think, if anything, they're going to win now. It just depends on if they feel like somebody can help them now. Otherwise, I think he'd be more inclined to trade down. You know, last year we put a lot of intention. I think the Browns had the 44th pick. That was their first pick in the 2nd round. And everybody's speculating what they're going to do. And what did he do? He traded that to get Elijah Moore. If you look at the Browns right now, wide receivers, they're starting or their top 2 wide receivers were both acquired by Andrew Berry in a trade. Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore. I don't know why the blueprint would be any different. If there's a guy, whoever that might be, a Mike Williams, Jerry Jeudy, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Parker. I mean, there's 5, 6 of them rumored to be cap cuts that they think are somebody that can help them right now. I see them making that move as opposed to trading up, you know. And next year they have a first round pick again, supposedly. So I can see them loading up even for next year. You want to be a playoff team. The plan is to be a playoff team this year because they made the playoffs. Their pick is in the 20s, 23rd, I think. So that's what you expect to be picking. So to me, I think your assets, more picks are more valuable to you than maybe moving up to get a guy, unless you just think that's the guy that puts you over the top. But I just think where they're at, there's other ways to use those assets for this year.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear from one of those free agent, actually draft eligible wide receivers who's making his name at the Combine. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Go ahead and pop a clamp on that. Let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery, like this new $20 100X with its $1 million grand prize, I want to get my cut of that 76% payout.
So, good news. We're playing the largest family of scratch-offs ever. These Lady Lucks have all the fun and no complications.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, a name that has been tied to the Browns some in the current mock drafts. Has been Xavier Worthy, wide receiver from Texas. He's the guy that set the combine 40-yard dash mark last weekend, running a 4.21, just ahead of John Ross's 4.22. Worthy on the Up and Adams show, talking about the parts of his game that might be overlooked.
I feel like I'm not getting enough credit for as good as an athlete and how smart I am on the field. I feel like just my production kind of speaks for itself. My film speaks for itself. I feel like I'm a nice route runner, if not one of the best route runners in the draft. So I feel like a lot of people are not giving me enough credit for that. If I was to compare myself to anybody, I modeled my game after Deshaun Jackson. So I feel like that was really like my kind of like my go-to, like whatever I needed, like to look at film or anything, I would look at him.
He comes on my show like every week. We love Deshaun Jackson. I just saw him at Super Bowl. Wait, when you watch him, what do you pick up? What do you see?
Just like how smart he is. He's a really smart football player. I feel like people don't give him credit for that. Just him understanding leverage and just what he does with the ball in his hands. I feel like I kind of took that into my game, and I feel like just with the ball in my hands, I feel like I'm dangerous for anywhere on the field.
So, Fred, the question is, do you think the Browns are still looking for that deep guy? Worthy, unlike Anthony Schwartz, and I've seen him a lot. I saw Texas play quite a bit this year. He looks like a football player who can run fast as opposed to a track guy trying to play. I always felt Anthony Schwartz was a track guy trying to figure out football. I don't get that sense with Worthy.
Yeah, he's an all-around player. It's just that, when you run a 4.21, you're probably going to be, way off the list than be there at 54 or wherever the Browns were originally projected to draft him. So that's what I said. A lot of those speed intrigues, and obviously it intrigues Andrew Berry. They went out and got Marquise Goodwin. He's a track guy that could go deep. Unfortunately, wasn't on the field a whole lot. I don't know if they'll bring him back, a year older. But, yes, they definitely want that element. But you want a football player. We saw with Anthony Schwartz, he could never turn the edge. It seemed like the angle, he could never get into his speed because, like you said, I felt he was more of a track guy as opposed to the guy that could, be jitterbug and get outside and make a move to beat like a Tyreek Hill. So, yeah, I think that would be a tremendous fit for the Browns. I just don't know if that particular individual will be there. But as far as, like you said, there's 11 or 12 that have very high scores, and the Browns like those RAS scores. and I think the record is like 12 wide receivers picked in the first couple rounds. So you can pretty much bet there's going to be somebody there. Is it going to be somebody that matches up to what they're looking for, the skill set? You got Cedric Tillman, more of a bigger, rangy, go get the ball type guy. So I would think they would be interested in the guy that can flat out fly. But, you know, Worthy put himself in another class because of what he did the other day. I mean, look at John Ross. He didn't turn out to be that great of a player, but because of his speed, you know, where he got drafted and the opportunities that he got. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. We've talked about it over and over. So much emphasis is what they do in their, you know, in their t-shirts and shorts as opposed to what they did on the football field. So when you look at Worthy, I think he'll garner a lot of attention because he could do the football aspect, and now when you see what he can do with the speed. So it will be interesting to see how far up the board he goes.
All right, so this one from the Bleacher Report, ranking the best fits for the top defensive free agents. Danielle Hunter, edge rusher for the Vikings. They say the top fits, number 1, the Lions, number 2, the Browns, number 3, the Bears. Browns had the league's number 1 defense in terms of yards allowed last season. Hunter could step in as Garrett's top complement, potentially replacing Zadarius Smith. Does know Kevin Stefanski from the Vikings as well, so don't know if that's not necessarily a selling point, not necessarily a detriment, but it's a guy that Kevin Stefanski will be familiar with. If Hunter is in the price range, is he a guy that makes sense, do you think?
I think so. I mean, we saw reports, you know, today. I think the deadline, Brian Burns, I believe, was the top one, and Josh Allen. I think both those guys, you know, are getting close to being franchised if they haven't, or signed to their existing team. And that puts Hunter, who, you know, by many would be the top ranked one. So how aggressive teams are to get him, that would be the question. I'm sure they'll be very aggressive. They always are in edge rushers. Jonathan Grenard from the Texans seems like another guy. There are some edge rushers. I think Zadarius Smith is a guy they would like to bring back. And I think right now there's a reason when they traded for him, he put in his contract that he would be a free agent. So I think he would be able to test the waters pretty quickly and see if he's going to get offered a big contract. But other than that, I think all things being equal, the Browns would be in a good position to bring him back. But, yeah, you need somebody, and I think Zadarius Smith would be the floor. If you can upgrade, in my opinion, with a Hunter or even a Grenard, younger versions, or Bryce Huff, you know, I think that Chase Young, depending on how they look at him, you know, you would do that. I think on the defensive line that Andrew Berry will try to make a splash. I know last year it was a little underreported that Hargrave, who signed with the 49ers, the Browns and the 49ers, I was told, were the finalists. So if they were willing to go that deep with Hargrave, they got Tomlinson. I don't think that's going to prevent them from going after one of these edge rushers or defensive tackles. It's just, I don't know if they can get both, but I would think one of them they'll go hard to try to get, whatever they feel they have the best chance at doing. But I think Hunter would be tremendous, you know, with this defensive front. I think Zadarius Smith played well, and he didn't get a lot of credit because he didn't have the high sack numbers. But when you talk to Kevin Stefanski and Jim Schwartz, they praised him week in, week out in how well he played in the scheme, and it allowed some of the other guys to make plays as well. So I think that's definitely high on their priority list. I think Hunter would be a home run if you could get him.
Yeah, the other thing is guys are going to want to come here because they know with Myles Garrett, they're mostly going to get one-on-ones. You can't double-team everybody on that line. Myles Garrett's getting double-teamed. So this is from PFF, every team's highest-graded 2023 free agent signing. For the Browns, Shelby Harris, defensive tackle, ninth-year pro, produced when rushing the passer and stuffing the run, generating 23 quarterback pressures, 9 tackles for loss, or no gain on runs, latter ranking second among the Browns' defensive line behind only Myles Garrett. Fred, I know you wrote an article as well about the Browns' defensive tackle breakdown and looking ahead. Was Tomlinson worth it? I know it was something you addressed. And then go into what you saw from Harris as well in that article.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say, beauty's in the eye of the beholder on Tomlinson. I mean, he was the highest paid guy, $57 million. You look at his stats, weren't eye-popping. I mean, I think he had 3 sacks in one game, and that might have been all of them for the year. But just his presence up front in the run game, for a while the Browns were number 1 in run defense. They were number 1 overall in defense statistically. And I think he played a big part in that. And so for the Browns, I think that was worth the move. I think that Harris was probably the second best defensive tackle, and he would be well worth bringing back. But like I said earlier, when a guy gets in their 30s, sometimes they wait around to see if they get better offers. And because you pointed out how well he graded out, he might think he's worth more than getting a 1-year deal. So if the Browns really want him, they might have to sign him to a 2-year deal and give him more than they want. That's where it comes back to the aspect, can you get a Chris Jones or a Christian Wilkins or somebody of that front, and then maybe backfill with a Maurice Hurst or some of the lesser expensive guys on a 1-year deal. But yeah, Shelby Harris played well, and he was a guy that we talked about wanting to get last year, and he didn't sign until the end of free agency. So hopefully they have a good relationship and he would want to come back. But they definitely have to fill those spots. I mean, it's not a given that you're going to be able to fill. You're missing 3 starters or 2 starters or 3 guys in your rotation on the defensive line as we speak right now. So they have to fill them, and we'll see how aggressive they go after other guys to get an idea if they know they're going to be able to bring back some of the guys like Hurst and Harris and that. So, yeah, I think there's some to choose from. It's kind of like, in your eyes, what's most important.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. I saw an interesting article about the Browns possibly entertaining the idea of trading for Justin Fields. Now, I'm not at all giving up on Watson. I still believe he can be the franchise quarterback that the Browns thought they were acquiring a few seasons ago. But I can't lie, it is intriguing to think about Fields joining this roster. He would excel under Stefanski and Dorsey because Dorsey has worked with mobile big QBs in the past. But I don't know if Barry would do it because the perception would be set as if Barry is waving the proverbial white flag. What do you think about that situation? Thanks. Go Browns.
And here is the article that Rico is referencing. Trade suggestions from Ben Solik of the Ringer. Landing spot for Fields that I haven't seen mentioned much anywhere. Cleveland. I don't think the Browns have a good quarterback on the roster. They would benefit from low-risk, high-reward swing on an upside of Fields. If they find a starter in Fields, they can escape out of the back door of what is proving to be a catastrophically bad Watson contract. You know, Fred, that's not going to happen. The problem is if you pick up the fifth-year option on Justin Fields' contract, it's $25 million. So now you're at 80-some million in contract space for quarterbacks. They're going to ride Watson out at least for another year, and they aren't picking up Justin Fields in the interim.
No, I mean, I like Justin Fields. I don't, not just from Ohio State. I don't know why everybody's so down on the guy. It seems like I as a Browns fan, I don't think you really want to see him in Pittsburgh. And I just, yeah. And he wants to play. He's not going to come here to sit the bench. I just have a different opinion than a lot of these people that are, I know they don't like Deshaun Watson, and he hasn't excelled. But I think the biggest thing last year was he wasn't on the field. Mm-hmm. I mean, every time he got going, he got sidelined. Now, I wouldn't label him injury prone because that's just last year. And so, yeah, there's not been much to show for it since he's been here. But I don't see how you can just throw it all away. Now, at the end of this year, he plays the full season. If he would have played all 17 games last year and he was benched for Joe Flacco because he was playing so bad, not because he was injured, then you got a whole different ball game. But it wasn't because of his lack of production. The last game, he led him to a comeback win over the Ravens, arguably the best team in the AFC last year, 14 for 14 with a broken shoulder bone and a high ankle sprain. So let's just see how it plays out here. That's the issue. You know, a guy like Russell Wilson, who you got the Broncos going to pay $39 million of his salary this year. You could get him for like $1 million. He'd be great backup, but he wants to play too. So a lot of these guys want to start somewhere, and that's why I think Joe Flacco is waiting it out, and I think he probably should. And so Justin Fields isn't going to come here to be the backup quarterback and hope in a year or so, not even counting the financial side of things. I think he'd be great if you didn't have, you know, a quarterback already here. But, yeah, I don't see that happening. You know, I don't even know, you know, the individual and his reasoning. You know, I could see that if Watson was projected to still have an injury, it was going to keep him out at half the season or something like that, because they feel like they have a team to win now, and it's going to rise and fall with Watson, not another quarterback this year.
Yeah, that's why they redid the offensive staff. I mean, keep that in mind, is to maximize Deshaun Watson. All right, along those lines, so Michael Pittman was one of the guys that was projected to be a free agent. He is not going to make it to free agency, as the Colts are putting a free agent tag on Pittman, which means he's going to make $21.816 million a year at a minimum. They'll still try to get a long-term deal done with him. Cost of wide receivers is going up. Here are some free agents that are available. You got Marquise Brown, Calvin Ridley, Gabe Davis, Darnell Mooney, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. All right, we kind of previewed what we were doing. These are guys that could potentially be cap casualties as well, so they'd be available if they get cut or trade potential. Lockett, Williams, Gallup, Lazard, Michael Thomas. Do any of those guys pique your interest as far as, you know, trying to get that number 2 to complement Amari Cooper for the Browns?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Andrew Berry has shown the trade is your best bet to ensure that you acquire a player. I mean, Amari Cooper, you gave up a 5th-round pick for your number one receiver. Sure, you had to pay him 20-some million, but with the way you've had Jack Duffin on, the way they do business here, the contracts and the cash that Jimmy Haslam puts out up front, that hasn't been a problem. And so if you can get one of those guys, now I know Mike Williams has been injury prone, but my goodness, he was Deshaun Watson's favorite receiver when they were together at Clemson. And, he could be lightning in a bottle. In a trade, you assure you get him and you redo the contract and the trade like you did with Cooper. You traded for Elijah Moore last year. That was the highest pick you had, your second-round pick. So to me, you get into a bidding war in free agency. It always ends up this way. Mike Evans, tagged, not a free agent or he signed. Michael Pittman, you go down the list, they don't let him get away, and that puts everybody else's value higher and higher. And you go put all your chips in a basket with a free agent, all you do is kind of bid and drive the price up. Same way with T. Higgins. A lot of people thought, oh, he's going to be available. Those guys don't make it to free agency. So guys that are going to get cut because the team's they're way over the cap and they really are rebuilding, to me makes so much more sense, and I don't know who they feel would be that guy, but a Mike Williams, the guys like Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins, guys like that are available make more sense because you could probably get them for a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick. And then all you got to do is deal with the salary. And Andrew Berry's been pretty good at that. So I really think that's the direction they would go as opposed to free agency. If you end up can't doing that and you go to free agency, on that list, maybe a Gabe Davis, depending. I don't know if the other guy, Marquise Brown, he's been around, Calvin Ridley. I mean, Darnell Mooney, I don't know if they're more like an Elijah Moore type player. It just seems like a big receiver like a Gabe Davis or like I said earlier in a trade. Maybe they don't like a Mike Williams or just are scared away from the thing. But there are options when you go that route that you can make sure you got the guy.
Fred Greetham and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about the cornerback position for the Browns moving forward. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Fred, I know you did a breakdown on the position groups. I'm interested in the cornerback breakdown, and it's an analysis, look ahead. And you kind of answer the question that I was thinking as well. Do you think Greg Newsome gets traded or extended? Take us through that article and your thoughts there.
Well, I think the deadline, 50-year option, is 1st of May or something like that, I believe. And Andrew Berry has shown that, especially guys he's drafted in the first round, I think he's picked up the option on every one of them, even guys he didn't draft in Baker Mayfield, even though it sounds like they had already moved on from him when they picked up the option, or at least Jedrick Wills picked up his option. Obviously Denzel Ward and other ones. So I would think that Newsome his option would be picked up. I think clearly Martin Emerson has moved ahead of him. But Newsome's at least your third cornerback. It really comes down to what they think of Cameron Mitchell, last year's 5th-round draft pick. Do you think he has the potential to move ahead or be in the top 3? I would think that the Browns will pick up the option with Newsome or trade him, before. I think if they think they're going to move on from him, they'd try to trade him at the draft or before the option time comes to pick up. If he's still around, I believe they'd pick up the option. I'm really a proponent. You don't move on unless you have somebody better. And why would you create a hole? You know what Newsome is. He might not be elite, but he's a pretty good player. He's one of your top 3. I just don't know if you can pay your third cornerback, as much as you do like Denzel Ward, or that's the type of contract he wants. Last year, he went and got a new agent, Drew Rosenhaus. He denied that he wanted to be traded or he was asked to be traded. But there's a reason he went out and got a new agent. He wants to be paid like a Denzel Ward or a top outside cornerback. And I think he was upset because he was going to be played more in the slot, and slot cornerbacks get paid about half what the outside do. So it just depends on behind the scenes, what he wants and what they're thinking long term of him. But I think they would pick up the 5th-year option, all things being equal. He would at least play, this year, and then they would have time to move on from him and find a replacement, kind of like what they're doing with Jedrick Wills.
Before I let you go, you also did that with the linebackers. So when you look at the linebacker core, do you think they are able to re-sign Taki, and do you think JOK gets extended?
I think definitely JOK gets extended. Right now, he's your most reliable linebacker. I know they don't put a lot of emphasis on linebackers, but you need some depth, and you need somebody more athletic to go along with JOK. But I do think Taki would be a smart move. I'll put in a plug. I have 6 steps to keep the Browns in the playoffs. I do this every year. I hit on most of the free agents, or I should say we at the OBR did. A lot of them that they signed, and that's starting tomorrow, starting with number 6, all the way counting it down to number 1 Monday morning when free agency tampering begins. And I talk about some of this with linebackers, about what they should do with Taki and Anthony Walker. I still think they can look for maybe an upgrade. Walker finished again on injury reserve for the 2nd year in a row. So I think they can bring him back. Taki will just depend on interest on the open market, but I think they can bring both them back. But I have some ideas on who else they could bring in. So check that out at theobr.com. But yeah, interesting. And those were 2 of the starters that aren't under contract, along with like Shelby Harris or Maurice Hurst. So all those guys are in the mix to return. It's just, are they going to be able to get it done?
Fred Greetham, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Make sure you check them out. 6 steps for the Browns, repeating Orange and Brown report starting tomorrow and leading up to the beginning of legalized tampering, as it were, in the NFL Monday.
Yeah, that's when they say legalized tampering, but I made the mistake thinking it started Wednesday. Everything's done starts at noon. Everybody's signed, and it goes fast and furious. So yeah, we'll have that starting Wednesday through Monday morning. We'll have everything we think that they may do.
As always, appreciate the time and the insight. Great stuff, Fred. Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. Orange and Brown Report. As he said, starting tomorrow, you can get the 6 steps that they have for the Browns to repeat and make the playoffs. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan, straight ahead. We continue talking Browns. Stay with us.
Here comes the rush.
All right, everybody, let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery,
Like the $10 Lady Luck 50X. It's got prizes all the way up to 500 grand, so you could really clean up.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever, with 5 price points from $1 to 20. They're an easy way to cook up some fun.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yeah, hi guys. This is Ron from down here in Clayton, Ohio. Just want to start off by saying you guys definitely have the #1 Cleveland Browns show. Watch you every day. Thank you so much for all the great insight you have. Now to my question. I was wondering what is going on with Mike Woods. I know last year when he got injured, he was looking really, really good. And I was wondering if maybe that's why Barry doesn't sound so in such a hurry to get another wide receiver, it seems like. I haven't heard much about him, and I was wondering if you guys could give me kind of a update on how he's doing, and will we see him back this year? Thanks a lot, guys. And as always, woof.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Mac, you got to stay on the field is the big thing. I know they like Michael Woods, but he hadn't been able to get on the field. They'll bring him into training camp, mini camps before that, and see if he is good to go. But they do like him, but he's more of a depth piece at wide receiver at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's at least being kind at this point, for his career. Again, he was somebody that came in, was a flyer, a late 6th-round pick. Again, had some flashes here and there, was able to build up some chemistry, but at the same time, really, when you look at the wide receivers, I don't really think that, Michael Woods potentially coming back is going to deter Andrew Berry from, going after a free agent wide receiver or going after somebody in the draft especially. I think that he's somebody who, could be a lottery ticket. Hey, we'll see how he plays out. We'll see how he does, how he looks when he comes back off the injury, and we'll go from there. But at the same time, I also think that for Michael Woods, this is a position for him where it's, hey, I'm trying to make sure that I stand out among Elijah Moore, among David Bell, among Cedric Tillman. This is a loaded wide receiver room. They haven't even mentioned Amari Cooper yet. So again, these wide receivers, they're all fighting for those reps on the field. And so Michael Woods, not only is he trying to get healthy, he's also trying to get caught back up to speed, not only with, his health, but also with a brand new offense under Ken Dorsey.
All right, so this one from Sports Illustrated. Every team's biggest roster holes this offseason for the Browns. Running back, edge rusher, and linebacker. Kareem Hunt is going to market. Nick Chubb could be behind, coming off a gruesome knee injury, and at 28 years old, it's a big cap hit. On defense, Zadarius Smith slated for free agency, which could leave the Browns without someone to complement Myles Garrett on the outside. All right. First of all, they're not cutting Nick Chubb. Second of all, they signed Obo Okenrankwo. So do they need a linebacker? Perhaps, but they don't value that as high. Running back, they probably need somebody to complement, Nick Chubb or to fill in the gap until he's ready. Edge rusher, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, and I almost would say not edge, but just defensive line as a whole. You have Okoronkwo there as well as Myles Garrett, obviously, but you also still have Alex Wright on his rookie deal that you took in the 3rd round just a couple of years ago in that same draft as MJ Emerson. So, you have some pieces there, but again, when the only defensive tackles that you have coming back next year is Siaki Ika and Dalvin Tomlinson, who you just signed to a big deal last year, that entire defensive line room is really looking for that extra boost. You're losing somebody like a Jordan Elliott, like a Mo Hurst, like Shelby Harris as well as Zadarius Smith, that all of those guys took up valuable snaps for this defense this past year. You're trying to replace those guys coming into next season as well, not only on the edge, but on the interior as well. That's where you're seeing a bigger need, I would say. As for the running back position, this is a good draft for the Browns in the sense that, there isn't a one true, like a Bijan Robinson like we saw last year, where it's, this guy's definitely going in the 1st round. But at the same time, you have a collection of guys, anywhere between 10 to 15 guys that really could carve out solid NFL careers that should be going in the late 3rd to, 4th round, 5th round, that area that I think could benefit the Browns, where, I could see them drafting somebody as well, or drafting 1, maybe 2 running backs. But at the same time, let's also not discount the fact that this is a historic running back free agent class as well. Obviously, you have the likes of Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry, who I don't think the Browns are going to be in on as well. But at the same time, you have somebody like a Jerick McKinnon that could potentially leave Kansas City. You have these guys that are going to be at lesser values that could be a value for Andrew Berry to possibly jump into. Even somebody who used to be with the Browns, like a Dearness Johnson. Somebody at a lesser value combined with a draft pick, I think could be the answer. As Nick Chubb, again, you mentioned the injury. He might not be back until October, November. Like, we don't know when we're going to get Nick Chubb back, much less the Nick Chubb that we saw pre-injury, if we're going to see that again. So that's something where you have to bolster that depth there as well, but again, at the right price.
Yeah, and Saquon Barkley's not going to get franchise tagged. So you're probably looking, the top end talents are, 9, maybe 10 million a year, and then it goes down from there. And that's Barkley and Henry, and then it goes down from there. The other thing that is interesting, I know they'd love to have, well, I believe they would really like to have Shelby Harris and Maurice Hurst back. Their markets may be a little bit more, expensive than they were a season ago with the cap going up. So we'll see. Along those lines, this is one move for each team in the NFL this offseason from ESPN. They say the Browns signing Christian Wilkins. It's a defensive tackle from the Dolphins. Had 9 sacks, 35 pressures, 63 combined tackles for the Dolphins last season, 13th in pass rush win rate among interior linemen, while taking on a lot of double teams. Also a very strong run defender. He's probably not going to get double teamed if he signs with the Browns. That would be the selling. Look, they double team and triple team Myles Garrett, Christian, so you're not getting double teamed. But Mac, why do you think Andrew Berry could be aggressive in pursuing Wilkins?
Well, he kind of fits a lot of connections when it comes to Cleveland, especially. Look just last offseason. Obviously, they signed Dalvin Tomlinson, but they were among the aggressive teams going after Javon Hargrave, who was leaving Philadelphia, who was there during Jim Schwartz's time in Philadelphia. But also just look at Jim Schwartz in general. If you look at his previous stops in his career, you have Fletcher Cox, who in every season that he was underneath Jim Schwartz was a Pro Bowler and made the first team All-Pro just once. Meanwhile, you had, Ndamukong Suh in Detroit, who had career seasons. Marcel Darius, who was largely a bust in the NFL, had his best career season under Jim Schwartz, as well as Jeffrey Simmons had his 2 best seasons underneath Jim Schwartz when he was an assistant there in Tennessee. So, again, seeing that position in particular, combined with the age of Christian Wilkins at just 28 years old, 2 years younger than Javon Hargrave, who they were going after last offseason, I think that it really is a recipe for the Browns really to take advantage of this and really take advantage of a market that I think really could be a unique situation to pair Myles Garrett with the interior pressure. And then also you have Obo Okoronkwo coming off the edge. You have an Alex Wright coming off the edge. Alex Wright at the end of the year really coming on as that interior defensive line was causing pressure. So if you're able to add in somebody the caliber of a Christian Wilkins combined with Dalvin Tomlinson in the middle and Myles Garrett on the outside, Myles Garrett's going to be doing crossovers left and right. I'm excited to see how these guys are able to go ahead and attack this, but also, again, for Andrew Berry, it's getting aggressive at the right moment and being opportunistic. That's the one thing that I think gets lost with Andrew Berry, is that people think that he might be more frugal, but he's more opportunistic when it comes to his aggressiveness on the open market.
Yeah, and the one thing that Jim Schwartz's defense do get is that defensive tackle that can penetrate on the interior. That's not really Dalvin Tomlinson. Tomlinson's more of a guy that's a run stuffer. We've seen he's got pressure, but the other thing about Andrew Berry, he has a value in mind for each of the guys that he's going to go after, and we saw with Hargrave last year, didn't go above it. All right, this is crazy talk season in the NFL, so let's get crazy a little bit. This from Clutch Points. It's a trade proposal. The Browns get defensive end Joey Bosa. Chargers get a 2024 draft pick and a future late-round draft pick. They don't delineate what 2024 draft pick, but a draft pick. Browns' highest pick this offseason's 54. Might seem insufficient for a player of Bosa's caliber. However, they could consider sacrificing future draft picks. If they can get Joey Bosa for a couple of draft picks, that will be something that I think Andrew Berry at least considers, because now you got your bookend for Myles Garrett.
Absolutely. And the thing with this, and again, you said it, I love the fact that it's a general 2024 pick. We don't really know which pick it is, but it's just a pick. Could be the second, could be the seventh. You have no idea. But, again, with the Chargers, they are in cap hell. Let's be honest about it. They are not in a good position with, between Joey Bosa, between Keenan Allen, Mike Williams as well. The previous spending has finally caught up to them at this point, and they even cut J.C. Jackson when he had a massive cap hit as well. But, again, seeing all of these players that could be potentially available, we've seen Andrew Berry take advantage of this a couple years ago with Amari Cooper, where, again, the Cowboys were in a situation where they needed to get off of that contract in order to be able to afford some of the other extensions that they had in order to clean up their books a little bit. So the Browns could jump in on this, but again, I think that it's really a weird number to jump in on, especially because of how much Joey Bosa is making in this next season. Again, that cap hit, you're trying to balance all of these coming around a little bit. So I think that for Andrew Berry, could I see him jumping at something like this? Absolutely. Do I think Joey Bosa could be worth it? I think so. But at the same time, I think the age for Bosa, as well as, some of the injury history that he's had in the past too, it makes me a little bit cautious. But again, if you're getting a 2024 7th-round draft pick, as it just says a draft pick, as well as, giving up a future draft pick there as well, it might be worth it. And again, Andrew Berry and his capologists, trying to just maneuver and just pull different levers here and there, might be able to get something done in that sense.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan and I. Going to step aside, take one more time out of the side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Talk a little bit about guys that the Browns might be targeting in the draft. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I feel like the one depth piece that we really haven't talked about is the tight end position. And I believe that the Browns are possibly going to just be moving on from Harrison Bryant since no moves have been made on his regard. I was looking at some draft prospects. Dalen Holker, I believe that he has some great rack. He went to Colorado State. I think he has great potential, and I believe he can fit the offense. I believe he'll be a great asset. Just let me know your opinions, and go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Mac, that's a guy that, when you look at it, could be available late third, fourth round type of guy. They might wait a little bit longer on a tight end than Holker, but it's certainly a guy that profiles with what they do at tight end.
Yeah, and the one thing with Holker too that I appreciated him running the whole the gauntlet drill. I think he was the one that had the 2 catches with one hand. But I thought that was interesting. But at the same time, he also had the slowest 40-yard dash out of all these guys too. I thought that he had some decent production out of Colorado State. But at the same time, again, I'm not basing it completely on the 40, but I look at somebody like a Ben Sinnott, out of Kansas State. I think that he's somebody who might be a little bit more well-rounded. Obviously, that's something that jumps out to Kevin Stefanski. And he had a very good vertical as well. But, again, a more well-rounded athletic tight end, I think, could make more sense for what the Cleveland Browns are looking for as well. And also there's also Tip Raymond as well out of Illinois. He was somebody who was a bigger body and is somebody who was more of a blocker at Illinois. I could see them possibly jumping in on that, maybe utilizing some of his athleticism that maybe went a little bit untapped out of Illinois. But, I think that for the tight end position as a whole, I do think that you're going to look to some of these guys, potentially restock your cupboard a little bit. Obviously, you have David Njoku as your one, but I think that kind of restocks you a little bit when it comes to the tight end position as well. I do think that they could target a tight end in this draft as well.
All right. Bleacher Report had a 3-round mock draft. We're going to take a look at who they had the Browns taking. Round 2, pick 54. They went with a wide receiver, Jalen McMillan from Washington. And then in round 3, pick 85, Braylon Allen, a running back from Wisconsin, and just 20 years old, so a youngin from the Big Ten. Start with McMillan. That's a guy that you see various sites kind of project to the Browns in that slot. What are your thoughts on McMillan?
For McMillan, obviously coming out of Washington, coming out of that offense with Michael Penix Jr., I think that it could be an interesting fit as well. Again, having some of that production from Washington, playing in the Pac-12, rest in peace at this point. But for having that long-sustaining career as well in Washington, I think he could be interesting. I do think that, that second-round pick in particular, though, I think is a really interesting spot when it comes to wide receivers, just because obviously we see a lot of the top-end talent in round 1. There's got to be a few of those guys that end up slipping down quite a bit. I know every year we get into, oh, this guy's a first-round pick. Oh, this guy's a first-round pick. Oh, this guy's a first-round pick. And then when it comes to April, everybody's wondering, how did that guy end up falling that far? And so, I feel like that, Jalen McMillan is somebody who I think is somebody that is popular, at least at this point, going to the Browns. But I do think that there are some other options that I think could be, an interesting fit. Potentially for the Browns there. I know I saw Xavier Legette right below them at that point from South Carolina. Apologies for butchering the pronunciation. But, again, seeing some of these different wide receivers and where they could be, I think that it's an interesting spot, especially given the fact that we don't really know what to expect out of this offense under Ken Dorsey, and also still having Chad O'Shea as a wide receiver coach, the different viewpoints that we could have potentially for this offense this year.
And then in third round, Braylon Allen is a guy that's intriguing with Wisconsin. Again, just 20, so he fits that age, kind of a bigger back. He will be interesting to see if he's around in the third, even the fourth round. Browns probably are looking at a guy like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, especially looking at, you mentioned it too, obviously the age is a big factor when it comes to Andrew Berry and what they kind of look at when it comes to all these positions, really. But, especially taking a look at somebody like Allen coming out of Wisconsin, they really tend to look at those Power 5 conferences and really tend to lean heavily towards those. And so Braylon Allen makes a lot of sense given the age, given the production that he's had at Wisconsin. I do think that he's somebody that could catch the eye of Andrew Berry, but I think you hit the nail on the head. That third to fourth round is that sweet spot that I could see Andrew Berry really jumping into that, potentially even if it's a trade down from that second round pick, maybe picking up an extra third, an extra fourth, trying to see if they can go ahead and maneuver in order to go ahead and maybe pick up one of these running backs that could be in that slot.
All right, before I let you go, this is from the 33rdteam.com, so those are former NFL executives, by and large, personnel guys and the like. Why Xavier Worthy could move down draft boards after the Combine. Worthy tested well in Indianapolis and actually, we showed you earlier, broke the Combine 40-yard dash time at 4.21. Concerns from the weigh-in could leave more questions than answers. Measured 5'11", 165. His lack of mass packed into a sub-6-foot frame leaves plenty of questions. Mac, this is a guy that I saw play at Texas with Quinn Ewers as their quarterback. I think he's more of a football player than a track guy. I didn't get that sense with Anthony Schwartz. I thought Schwartz was more of a track guy than a football guy. I think this guy's the opposite. Do I think they're going to take him in the second round? I'm not saying that. I'm not as concerned that he's a track guy masquerading as a football player as I was with Anthony Schwartz.
Yeah, and, when I watched some of that Texas tape, it's amazing how much he jumps out at you because, again, there's a lot of times where you'll see guys with speed, and like you said with Anthony Schwartz, sometimes it's about how much speed these guys have, but how well do they play with that speed in pads? That's what I always tend to look for, when I see all of these, combine darlings that we see at the 40-yard dash. But, Xavier Worthy was one of those guys that immediately you turn on the tape and you see him go ahead and turn it to another level. And for him, especially just that stop, start, and go, the ability to go ahead and turn up those gears, he's somebody that, like you said, I'm not worried about whether or not he can actually get the job done when it comes to his speed and whether that translates. I'm not worried about that at all. I think that there are concerns about, the frame that he has. I do understand that, and I did hear that, prior to the 40, that could drop him down a little bit as well. But at the same time, again, seeing Xavier Worthy and the ability that he has with the ball in his hands, I think that, you might have some teams that are willing to overlook that. But at the same time, those concerns are still there. Again, we're somebody that as light as him, that is sub 6 feet tall at that position especially, I do think that might be a bit of a concern, but man, he is so much fun to watch on the field especially.
Yeah, the other thing was, and I was at the Combine at his podium, they asked him quite a bit about the drops, and the answer he gave, he said it's flat out concentration, and I got to get better at it. That was his answer about the high drop rate. And it's like, okay, let's see it, though.
Well, and at that point, too, I respect him for giving the answer.
Yeah.
A lot of times, a lot of players will just be, we're trying to work through it. Give you the same coach speak answer that everybody expects, but at the same time, being able to see that and hear that from him, and at least the fact that he has the self-awareness to go, yeah, no, that's on me. I'm trying to get better at it. I'm trying to work on it. I love hearing that from these guys. And I love hearing that right up front from these players. And the fact that they're willing to give that answer out, I think is really, it really says a lot about them as players especially. But I'm really, really thrilled to hear that from him, especially combine that speed and you're able to maybe lower that drop rate quite a bit, especially if it's just concentration. Yeah, let's go ahead and see if we can turn that up a little bit, get those big plays cranking.
Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan, as always. Great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Mac.
Thank you, Dave. Always appreciate it.
Mac Robinson, 92.3 The Fan. Always really good stuff relative to the Browns. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.